So, hi, good morning, everyone. We are so excited to have Simone Dorgum and Larry Young from Singularis IT with us this morning. So, just want to welcome both of you into our episode here. So, this could be for either of you. Can you, one of you, speak about like what made you guys decide to join forces and do this together with Singularis IT?
I guess I'll take first crack at that. So Larry and I have actually worked together for 20 plus years, almost my entire oil and gas industry experience. I started at a company that was acquired then by a larger publicly traded company. I started at that company as a consultant doing IT work, um, and then got hired as they got acquired to be full time IT for them, and that's kind of where I met Larry in that first venture, and the experience was kind of great. We got put into a room together since I was IT and he was on the accounting administration side, and we were told to normalize 30 plus databases, and kind of felt like that Larry kind of says it best that because I was young and very naive at the time, thinking like, yeah, this is gonna be really easy, but it was not at all. And Larry basically told me that if we don't get this done, we're probably both going to lose our jobs, and we have a short amount of time to do it. So that's where we started, and then we went on to another company together. I left there during a merging time for them that they ended up selling to another company. After that, I decided to start the company, and I'll kind of let Larry kind of chime in on that because his side of that take is better than mine.
But yeah, Simone and I, we've known each other. I kind of had an epiphany in my career where I sacrificed a lot of stuff personal for the professional side of things. And after 32 years, decided, to really kind of reflect on what I enjoyed most and working on most. And, Simone's, really grown a pretty impressive business here. And one thing led to another. And Simone over the years kept telling me, one day you're going to work for me. One day you're going to work for me. And lo and behold, here I am.
Oh, that's
In other words, I got him.
Great. So yeah, so for those who are not aware, Singularis IT is one of our partners. So I'm gonna leave this space now for you guys to give a quick overview of what is it you guys do for Cargus customers.
Yeah. So Fareed, obviously, yes, we're a Cargus partner, and what Singularis IT really is our core aspect is we're a cloud hosting, or that's the buzzword, but we're a managed hosting company at heart, and that is our core competencies, our core values, our core offerings, and naturally, we are also able to provide those managed services as well from a local IT perspective, or even in-house IT from a failover or a backup perspective, for if they have a single person or a single company, or level one or even greater up to engineering, and even CIO or director style services for our customers and clients. Um, what we specifically strive on, and what we specifically classify ourselves as best in class of managed hosting and managed services, and we have kind of a little bit of an arrogance to us internally that we don't want to ever sell for short, because I would say it's like a giant weight on us in that world, because we're allowing, and the company is pretty much putting all of their eggs and their business and their data in our services in our world. So we have to make sure that we are providing the best in class service to allow them to really continue to grow. Let IT really work for them, because our philosophy is, business drives IT. IT does not drive business, and that's kind of the fact of reality there. And then more importantly, we firmly believe, and it's one of our core values as well, that people do business with people, and we want to 100% really humanize the IT aspect of it. It's not just blinking lights and data somewhere offsite. It's really people doing business with people.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the two most common types of cybersecurity attacks are what we call phishing and ransomwares, right? So can you, either of you, or kind of briefly go over like what each one is and how those each of those breaches happen and what happens when a company fall into each of these kind of types of attack?
All right. So I guess fishing, and not on the lake, not that type of fishing. But fishing basically comes down to, it's typically generally done in a couple different methods, and it's attacked and it's provided to you or presented to you in a couple different ways. One, and the most common, is actually email. It will come through and it will come in looking like, Larry Young sent me an email, but it's not really Larry Young. There may be misspellings. There might be a capitalized character in a word that isn't, or it might have a little funkiness to it because of like the mobile. And they'll get smart enough that they'll even say sent from a mobile device. So you need to pay attention to all of the context within the email before clicking on anything in that perspective. And then you also got to ask yourself, why is this individual sending me this email, and should this individual send me this email? That's one form that they come in. Another form is actually on some websites. If there's no proper web filtering, you'll get a phishing ad out of nowhere, and then that ad will track you based on the cookies, and then they'll send you an email to come in. So they kind of captured you here and then send it in on the other way, basically. So that's its secondary form. And then another form is also text messaging. Those three areas are the biggest, I would say, attack front surfaces that come in that you need to look for from a phishing perspective. And those are typically the beginning stages of the next segment, which we'll get into when Larry describes some of the ransomware.
So I think when we start talking about ransomware, oftentimes ransomware is comes in through email by clicking on an attachment, and then it'll look for vulnerabilities either in that particular piece of equipment, or it'll try to spread throughout your entire network. Where it becomes devastating is if it does get throughout your entire network, it actually encrypts your data, and once the bad actor realizes he's done that, you'll get a black screen, typically a black screen message saying, we've hijacked your data, pay X in Bitcoin, to us, and we'll decrypt it for you. This really wasn't a consideration until the introduction of cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrency is absolutely it's almost impossible to trace. So you really don't know whether you're dealing with somebody onshore or offshore. It really doesn't matter. What I will tell you in my experience on the consulting side of things, where I saw clients be subject to ransomware attacks, authorities both at the state and federal level become involved, and it really turns your organization upside down. We don't want to scare anybody with that, but if you're interested, I can give you a couple of examples that are pretty well publicized. The big one that has reverberated out throughout the healthcare industry, it was the Change Healthcare ransomware attack, and that really kept folks from or medical providers, whether it be hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices, from being able to process claims, to state, federal, and private insurance. So it had a devastating impact on cash flow for those. In my own personal experience, I work with a human services organization. We were called in after they had a ransomware attack. They're a pretty nice sized business, about $5 million a year in revenue, 50 to 60 employees. But that attack literally shut their operation down for 8 days. It took 8 days to recover. And based on the nature of their mission, they had their clients in the human services space that were not able to take care of and provide the services to during that period of time. There are, nobody, for the most part, nobody likes to admit they've been subject to a cyber attack. But there are cases within the propane and heating oil industry. From folks as large, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, the Colonial Pipeline was struck, and that had a huge impact. But then, I can think of several dozen propane and heating oil companies that I've come into contact doing what I do that have, confided in me that they've been subject to a ransomware attack. It's just a terrible experience for folks.
I got so many follow-up questions, so I don't want to lose my train of thought here. But like, so just kind of summarize what you just said. So a few things here. So one, if a company, we see that a company goes down, the system goes down, would you say most likely they've fallen into a ransomware attack then, if it's some sort of a cyber attack? Is that why
It's a
they're
pretty
down?
good it's a pretty good degree, yes. There's also other reasons why a company
Mhm.
will go down. There could be a major hardware failure or other
Yep.
failures,
Yes, that's what I
in
was
that
thinking.
perspective. But I would say in today's cybersecurity world, it's probably a 60-40, where 60% of it could very well easily be a ransomware, some sort of a targeted attack, whether it's ransomware or some other vulnerability, similar to it that isn't a ransomware, but it's still a vulnerability that broke something in some software, some code, or something in that world. And then obviously hardware is hardware.
Yep. And second follow-up to that is, um, so the goal, true to the name, ransomware. The goal, they didn't want to steal your data and kind of misuse it or anything, but their goal is to get you to pay them to
Hmm.
so you can operate again. Correct?
Correct.
So,
Yep.
Correct.
in your experience, has that been how has company gotten out of that when they got attacked? Do they have to basically pay the ransom?
I was going to say that there's two ways. I mean, some people will want to pay the ransomware. You almost don't ever want to do that, or the ransom. And but sometimes you have to because you don't have the proper recovery measures in place, or the recovery services in place. If you are subject to a ransomware and there's a chink in the armor that broke free and allowed that to happen, your managed hosting partner, or your IT company or your internal IT, whoever it is that you have and that, yeah, you are with, you should ask the questions: what's my recovery like, and how many forms of recovery do I have, and what are the checkpoints? Um, there's many ways to actually set up recovery. Where with us at Singularis IT, we have multiple forms of recovery, and we believe in a 3-2-1 approach, where there's 3 levels of copies with 2 different paths, copying and protecting one form of data, basically. And we can send out some information based on that if people ask and want to know about it, but it's considered the 3-2-1 backup rule. But you also use that in terms for recovery as well. We have our best in class service of, we have an option and a solution that you can have your entire data replicated down to the millisecond and held in retention for 48 hours or even a greater point in time if they choose to. Our base core is 48 hours, but you might have a database or a set of files or a set of a server or something that you want it to be longer than 48 hours. No big deal. We can customize that for the client, for the partner, because again, it's their box, not ours. We're just giving you all the tools to build the box, basically.
Okay, so you're saying, if I can kind of put it in layman's terms here, you're saying that uh, if the structure is in place, then a company can recover from these attacks by just basically restoring from a backup or layers of backup that you set up in such a way that is unaffected by the attack. Correct?
Yeah,
And
you can either restore from a backup or you can bring up the secondary site
oh,
from
you just bring
five
up
minutes
secondary.
prior to. Yep, there's 2 forms to do it from. Absolutely.
And what do you do? I don't know if this is too technical, but what do you do with the site that is being ransomed? You just kind of let it go then?
It
That part?
actually it actually gets replaced. It gets destroyed
Oh,
and
you just
replaced.
replace it. I see.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense now. See, like these are some of the things that technically we don't think about, but it
Yeah.
makes sense now. Okay.
But
Um,
but most of the time, you actually don't need to destroy the entire environment. You're able to just restore and recover just the segments that were really broken, and
hmm.
then you go from there. But
So when
and
those
Larry can
things
get
are
into
not
this.
available, you got to pay up.
Yes.
There's no.
Yeah, that oftentimes we see that. I think the other thing, I mean, we focused on email as a distribution method for ransomware, but ransomware does come through other networks too. I mean, it can be broadcast, and it's basically out over the internet. Um, and whether it's a data connection, or it's a website, that's an imposter for something else or impersonating something else. You can inadvertently trigger it, or one of the big things and one of the buzzwords is tech debt. But there is you figure, technology has barely become mainstream over the last 30 years, but we see a lot of equipment out there that's 15 years old and no longer supported. And through if that machine's connected to the internet and there's a malware out there looking for certain vulnerabilities in operating systems, it can get into your network that way. One of the retailers, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Target, maybe. But yeah, it actually came in through their environmental control system, and had a big impact on them. So there are various avenues, email being the most common, but there are other avenues out there.
Hmm.
Okay. So that was actually going to be what my next question was going to be. So you're saying, because I was going to ask, like, it sounds like with phishing and ransomware, the way we described it prior to that last bit was that there is an element of human error that happened somewhere along the way that kind of let the bad guys in, so to speak. Uh,
It's
has that
actually
been
more
kind of
like
your
negligence. It's a little bit
negligence?
more like negligence.
Right.
You need to stay up and on top of, the applications and the systems that are protecting and really just running your services and running your business. In that perspective. And for an IT company that, or even just an IT person that doesn't do it every single day and it isn't a part of their core business and their core competencies, they're always running behind. In that world, in that perspective. So having the partner or the IT company that you're going to have, or the hosting company, getting that's a great thing to ask, is what is the patching schedule like? How often do you do it? And what happens when there's an emergency update? How quick do you apply them? Those are all things that you should be asking, you know us, other hosting companies, your current IT company, and more importantly, the ones that we find that are actually the ones that are relatively behind are really the ones that are just those local IT guys, or that single IT person in an organization. They don't have time to keep up with all of it. Because and therefore it's supporting and recovering and protecting. That's a lot. It's a heavy lift, in today's world.
And on the other side, Larry just also said that there is a element of just literally they hack you, right? They broke through some vulnerability in your system because you
Hmm.
have outdated hardware and whatnot. So there's
Yep.
those couple elements going on. Okay, so without naming any clients that you experienced this, like with the clients that you are managing, that they have people clicking on stuff and it got into an attack and you guys are cleaning stuff up.
Actually, so it's kind of funny you asked that. We have come into a lot of clients that have had those issues, and now they're calling us or they're with us because they've had those issues and they don't want to deal with it again. Um, I'm not going to say that we've never had not a ransomware problem. I'm never going to say we've never had an attack on a client. We've have had a client get attacked. Um, and it took down their web services for a grand total of 2 hours. And everyone's like, man, 2 hours, it doesn't seem like it's a long time. But when you're that company and you are unable to perform or an operation that you're used to doing, 2 hours feels like 2 weeks, right? But what happened was our systems actually uh, picked the vulnerability up, found the attacker, black holed the attacker. This was all automated, based on our the security tolerances and the levels that we have. That's for every single company. It picked up on it, it blocked it, it black holed it, and it actually shut the system down. So that way, then it's in a dormant state, and it wouldn't spread any more than it did. So therefore, it completely black holed the outside to come in, and it black holed the individual or that server in house in place. So that way, then it can't affect anything further outside of that. That is how best in class security services work. Um, is it free? No, nothing's free, but we make it as affordable as possible. And that's why we offer it as a core fundamental. Matter of fact, actually, Larry can give you an example, where he had a vulnerability update unknown to him, and the system did its job. So, Larry, why don't you kind of explain that? Because that's a real world thing that everyone happens automatically every single day.
Yeah, so we in the last year we've implemented Sentinel-1 as our extended detection response tool, and our phone system actually I had installed on my desktop, and I got a notification there was an update, so I clicked on the update, and it came through with a Type 32 DLL, which is it's very common, but it's one of the ones that's used most frequently to propagate malware. Um, so the Sentinel-1 didn't recognize it. So literally in a matter of about 30 seconds, it cut my access to the network, shut down my internet connection from that device, removed the software package, and basically locked me out of the network and the internet until I went to administrator, let us back in. And it literally, I mean, it was, you hear about these things, you'll see demonstration from the vendors, but actually to experience in real time how quickly that product worked was absolutely amazing. Um, you'll hear about 0 day, and when we start talking about the ransomware, there's a tendency to try to troubleshoot and deny it yourself. That's one of the worst things you can do, because you're losing time, and that malware is still trying to spread throughout your network to other devices. Um, so, this as far as a 0 day vulnerability product, really, it's really just an incredible experience. Now, it turned out to be a false positive, but I'd argue that you'd rather have a false positive than let the vulnerability through.
That's awesome. Okay, so have you guys been noticing? Is there like an upward trend on these attacks? Why do you think it's happening? And what are sort of the latest trends here in this space?
So
Larry,
I
you want me
think
to take it
I think
first?
that's a great question,
Oh,
and
go ahead.
as much as you hate to acknowledge this, we were recently attended a cybersecurity seminar by one of the largest providers in the industry, in the managed services industry. Um, Unfortunately, cyber attacks are a very lucrative criminal enterprise, to the
Hmm.
tune of about $45 billion a year. Um, so I think what we've seen overall, I mean, it's millions and millions of, if not tens of millions of attacks a year. There is a trend towards more phishing attacks than there are ransomware. Actually, ransomware has been the total volume of ransomware attacks, the total count of ransomware attacks has gone down in the last couple of years. However, the actual ransom being demanded has gone up 300 to 400%. And there's some real horror stories out there.
Yeah, and the oil and gas industry, I see we do see hesitation in accepting or adopting the security practices from time to time, and and it could very well be, and it's what we're finding is that it's just sometimes lack of education. You know, we Larry touched on earlier. We really strive ourselves on educating the client to allow them to make a business decision because back to what I said, business drives IT. IT doesn't really drive business. So these are all business decisions. It's a decision that you need to make, whether and therefore, how much protection do you want, and then how much actual recovery services do you want as well, in the event of your protection is going to eventually at some point have a fault in it. It's never going to be perfect. It's always in catch up mode, for the most part, and there's always that little 5% sometimes that it's not. And that's the operational aspect, where when it isn't, in catch up mode, therefore it's always protecting you. So therefore, there's that small percentage that you need to really, really make sure that you have phenomenal recovery services, because that smaller percentage can easily, disrupt your business for a day or two, a week, if you don't have the right services, basically there.
As a closing wisdom to the viewers out there, because they could be in different positions within the propane industry, and they all are not immune to these types of cybersecurity attacks. So, what are some of the final words or takeaways that you should leave our audience with, in terms of just better protecting themselves from falling into these type of attacks, or any other advice you might want to give to our viewers here?
I guess my advice to most people is you want to inventory what you have, because it's really it's like the old adage of a chain. It's the weakest link that's going to let that vulnerability in. We live in a world, and in this environment, there's tank monitors everywhere, and they're all fine devices, and those companies are all secure. But as those things age out, you want to get them out of service and replace them. As tempting as it is to, I'm going to go one more season, or I've got a PC that's still running Windows 7 and it works fine. If these things, if your vendor or the software publisher like Microsoft tells you that's no longer supported, it has to come out of service.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that I would leave, a couple big things that I would leave is ask questions. How much risk am I at here? And what is my risk? And where is it? And then act upon it. Don't just ignore it. Because if you ignore it today, it could be the thing that cripples you tomorrow. So, I mean, certain things is you just got to really ask questions, learn, find the partner that will make the best business decisions with you and give you the pros and cons, and really kind of keep you protected in your best interest, because you know we don't want to just offer all these services just to offer them to drive the revenue up, right? It actually costs significantly more money to recover somebody and have to actually bring them back online than it does to pay for some of these services ahead of time. And have the company or have the partner help you do an analysis of what it costs to actually, if you are down for service for an hour, 2 hours a day, a couple days, whatever the case may be, there's tools out there that will help you do that, and put it back on your partner. That will also help you identify if that's the right partner for you, because it should no longer be a vendor. It should be a partner, because they're going to be the ones to help you get protected and also help you get recovered in that perspective. So it's in your best interest that they have your best interest entirely.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Simone and Larry. I really appreciate you guys coming and kind of divvying out wisdom here. And I think it's something that everybody's gotta hear, because, like I said earlier, like it's only increasing in severity, and also just frequency, and it's just we want to make sure that you're well protected, and then working with a partner that can provide, like what you said there, with layers of protection, and also a way to recover when you are being attacked and fall into some of these attacks. So thank you guys. Thank you, Singularis IT. I really appreciate it. I'm going to leave your contact info on the description of this video. So if you are interested to talk more to Singularis, please feel free to do so. We'll be glad to connect you guys. So yeah, once again, thank you for your time, and yeah, I hope this has been helpful. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, and ask questions. Looking forward to it.